Welcome to Sarfatti Science Seminar's Cortona 2023 event. It's May 23rd, and today's speaker is Dr. Jack Sarfatti, with commentary by Larry Lemke, Dr. David Chester, and others. I'm your moderator, Tim Ventura, and we'll begin with a discussion of advances in UFO Metric Engineering Physics Part 1 by Jack Sarfatti.
Let's see how this goes now.
The war on reality. Earth's civilization in 2022 is at a turning point, split between irreconcilable competing narratives on many levels: political, cultural, moral, scientific. If the UFO evidence is real, then we do not live in a boring universe. We are not alone in the universe. We are being visited by more than one kind of advanced intelligence who are able to control gravity with small amounts of energy. That is weightless warp drive time travel from future to past with no time dilation problem. Not all of them are friendly, though some seem to be.
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
Whoever controls the Einstein-Rosen wormhole, low energy gravity propulsion, and EPR quantum entanglement signaling has a decisive military superiority advantage. In Lenny Suskind's words, ER equals EPR. I actually got the first inkling of this back in 1975 when I contributed to the very popular silly comic book called Space Time and Beyond. Key people are UFO contactees. Jim Simivan from the CIA, retired. John Ramirez from the CIA, retired. Hal Puthoff, U.S. Navy, National Security Council, etc., physicists like me. Gary Nolan, Stanford professor, a very successful biotech entrepreneur. Gary is now studying to retrieve materials from the flying saucers and also the blood from military personnel who have been damaged by close contact, probably with the anti-gravity blue shift from the flying saucers.
Jack, the audio is going in and out on that.
The Bigelow defense contractor, the former owner of Skinwalker Ranch, Joe Firmage, who funded us 20 years ago at ISSO to try to unlock the secrets of flying saucers. We failed then, and he lost his money in the crash, but we've succeeded since then. Uri Geller, close friend of Bibi Netanyahu, and of course myself, Jack Sarfatti.
The UFO cover-up, since at least Orson Welles did his War of the Worlds broadcast October 30th, 1938, was because our physicists had no idea how the objects could possibly fly. Oh, and also I wanted to add that it turns out Benito Mussolini was really interested in this UFO issue. In fact, Jacques Vallée actually talks about this in one of his books. And Mussolini enlisted Marconi, Marconi was a close friend of my father's cousin, Margherita Sarfatti, at that same time, to investigate the UFO. So apparently there's quite a bit of UFO data from the Italian fascist period, which I guess Phil Corso may have actually had access to, because he was, Phil Corso was actually in Rome at the end of toward the end of the war. He was running operations, I guess, for the U.S. Army in Rome, because I guess he was fluent in Italian. Okay, Roswell 1947, I believe, really happened, as did similar incidents. I was part of a U.S. Army project in the late 1940s to the 1950s to develop a cadre of, quote, genius children to solve the UFO paranormal problems. This goes way back, just, over 70 years, okay? And I am a living witness participant, observer participator in that. So I'm speaking from frontline experience in the thick of it, as Dennis Bardens from MI6 once told me at the Blue Boar Inn at Cambridge University, and I guess it was 1974 when I was at the Psychic Research Society with Brian Josephson, Nobel Prize physicist, and Bernard Carr, who was Stephen Hawking's assistant, but this is a whole other story. I was actually brought there by people from the CIA. They drove me up from London. Let's go on. I also had direct contact in 1953 with what claimed to be a time-traveling conscious computer on board a spacecraft from the future that essentially told me I would meet Hal Puthoff, Russ Togg, and other physicists in 1973, which in fact happened at Stanford Research Institute. And curiously enough, you can actually hear I believe it was a CIA recording of that actual meeting back in 1973. There's about an hour or so of that. It was actually a much longer meeting, but this is an excerpt, and you can hear me talking my first meet Hal Puthoff and Russ Togg and everything that was with Brendan O'Regan and everything that was said about all this stuff. In fact, it was Russ Togg who says, "Oh yeah, we think the flying saucers are coming, time machines coming back from the future." This is back in 1973, right? With Russell Togg and Hal Puthoff. Okay, and we know that was a CIA operation even back then. So this goes way back. And okay, so where are we now? Let's go on to
John Ramirez, the first intelligence agency analyst, retired at Central Intelligence Agency, said, quote, "I urge everyone curious about UAPs to watch Dr. Sarfatti's video. One does not need a Ph.D. in physics to understand or at least appreciate the concepts explained simply and eloquently by Dr. Sarfatti. The scientists who work on UAPs with access to the metamaterials on behalf of the military and civilian intelligence communities just cannot admit that Dr. Sarfatti is correct." Okay, by the way, Creon Levitt, who's a very important guy now in this whole area, basically will back up what CIA's John Ramirez says. And John Ramirez is basically talking about Christopher Mellon, that big shot Mellon guy, Dr. Eric Davis, Hal Puthoff, Jacques Vallée, Colonel John Alexander, and last but not least, Louis Elizondo. So I urge these guys to start waking up as to what's really going on here, especially now since Putin's agents, Putin's physicists at Moscow State University have asked me to actually travel to Moscow in July 2023 to give them my vision of what this UAP warp drive metric engineering physics is all about. Now, what's wrong with this picture, guys? Let's get with it, huh? Okay, now, again, I wrote, the key point never to lose sight of is that from my military intelligence contacts, not only in the USA, is that we are playing catch up. The metric engineering tech is already operational, which is why the CIA, the Department of Defense, the US Senate Intelligence Committee, and everybody else on our side of the pond are freaking out inside their skiffs, as well they should. And it's also why Moscow invited me to go there in the middle of the Ukraine proxy World War III we are in the middle of. Of course, I will not physically go there because they'd be nuts to let me return. I will Zoom them if they wish.
okay, what comes next?
Okay, this slide is some of the evidence for warp drive. And I won't go through the entire slide because most of you are already quite familiar with this. I didn't write this, I forget where it's from, but the authors say I guess this is Kevin Knuth, and the authors say that, based on traditional notions of propulsion, that's Newtonian physics, where objects are actually moving through space, in this case through the atmosphere, which is not warp drive. Warp drive is totally different. But they said they calculated UAP accelerations range from 40 G forces to hundreds of G forces, and estimated power based on a weight of 1 ton range from 1 to 9 gigawatts. Of course, that's not what's happening. Manned aircraft such as the F-22 and the F-35 are limited to 9 G forces, and the F-35 has maintained structural integrity only up to 13.5 G forces. All right, guys, what does this mean? This means that we are like Lilliputians, and there's this giant Gulliver, this, in control of this advanced gravity technology, which only Jack Sarfatti right now really understands. Okay. And that's why the Russians want me to go to Moscow. Whoever gets this technology basically, runs the planet. Because, all our military technology, our jet planes, our rockets, our missiles, maybe even our nuclear weapons, they're all impotent and obsolete, to quote Ronald Reagan's State of the Union speech. I guess it was 1986, which, by the way, I actually wrote those lines for Ronald Reagan, but that's a whole other story. So you want disclosure? This is it. It's not going to get any better than this, guys. So let's go on to the next slide. Okay, this slide, again, is more evidence. And we know, most of you already know this stuff, so I'm going to move on to the next slide, because you can all read this at your leisure without me. Okay, this is still more data on the evidence for the phenomenon. And again, you can read this at your leisure if you don't already know. And most of you are quite familiar with this information. So let me move on.
Oh, okay.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, this is an important slide provided by Rick Doty. Controversial figure, but most of us in the UFO weird field, we have enemies and friends, and everybody's, you can't believe what people say. But in any case, Rick Doty was a retired Air Force intelligence agent, and everything he says here, I think, must be taken very seriously. That the captured craft designated Cardinal 3, which was described as a 30-foot in diameter saucer-shaped flying craft. The exterior was made of an unknown material, but was extremely lightweight that could absorb sound waves. I'm saying that material is a metamaterial. Cardinal 3 weighed about 3,405 pounds. The interior of the craft contained 3 seating positions with hand control panels. There were no other conventional controls, wires, switches, knobs, or buttons. The flight control system was unknown. We know what it was. It's warp drive, controlled by the electrical signals of the pilot, which these pilots, these Greys, are they're artificial conscious. In fact, they are those are what contacted me in 1953. They're artificial robot. They're conscious robots, basically androids, but they have organic component. There's this there's this guy, what's his name? Miles Albert, who just contacted me because it's destiny. The future is determining what's happening to us now. You might as well. Resistance is futile, guys. Resistance is futile. The Borg is coming. There's nothing you can do about it. The future's been set. We're just getting the message. I am the messenger, from the future, back from the future. And so the flight control system was unknown. But now we know what it is. Basically, the propulsion system was too advanced to be understood by scientific personnel. Yes, that is true. by the way, Colonel Phil Corso in his book Day After Roswell says the same exact information that Rick Doty is here saying. Now, of course, that could be, let me be like Mick West, this guy, Mick West, he thinks he's so smart, this video game guy, thinks he knows everything. Well, let me be for a minute like Mick West, and let me play the skeptic. Let me play the Inspector General, the Grand Inquisitor from the Spanish Inquisition, and say, well, of course, Rick Doty just got this information from Phil Corso. He just read the book like everybody else. Well, that could be. I don't deny that. That's a simple explanation for why Rick Doty is basically repeating verbatim what Colonel Phil Corso said in his book, The Day After Roswell. However, I have another source, and I cannot identify that source. I have another source who can confirm everything here. And this is a military source. And this source, when we got together and we spoke, this source told me the exact same information that's in the slide you see. And then when I told my source, my friend, oh, that's just what Phil Corso said. He said, who's Phil Corso? He never knew. He never read the book. And I know he's not lying to me. Okay, so now let's suppose I'm like a cop now, like Sherlock Holmes. We have very fragmented evidence. We're trying to put together a narrative, a coherent explanation for all this weird stuff that's going on. So here I have a military source who I know I can trust, who's telling me the exact same details that are in this slide, but he never saw this slide or knew about any of this other work. But he was directly involved in the project. Okay, and for a long time, I'm not gonna say how long and where it was. But so to me, this is the clincher. This is, so you got to take this literally, got to take it seriously, as silly as it sounds. I believe now, to the best of my knowledge, using what's called Bayesian inference, that anything we think we know about reality, about empirical reality, about our experience, is always uncertain knowledge. And we have to form the best possible optimum explanation narrative. And I say I have it. And I don't have any peers in this, guys. I mean, Chris Mellon doesn't know anything. Louis Elizondo, they don't know. And everybody telling them, the people they talk to in the CIA, they don't know either. They don't know any more than I know. In fact, I think, and I know I sound arrogant, but I think I know more than any of these guys in the CIA. Now, I hope to be proved wrong. Maybe one day they'll prove that I'm wrong, that they already know this, but I don't think so, and I'm calling their bluff. Okay, let's stop. Let's go on to next. Okay, well, this slide basically summarizes what I just said in the last slide, that the Roswell reports, the Phil Corso's reports in The Day After Roswell, we have to, I now accept, to the best of my knowledge, that is the truth, the literal truth, almost every detail. Let's stop here, go on to the next one. All right, this is also the, I think, an Elizondo's slide. This is the whole high strangers. The best thing Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis ever did was that paper they wrote on high strangers about the experiences at the Bigelow Ranch. That's when Bigelow owned it, before Brandon Fugel got it from Bigelow, and before this current History Channel thing, with Travis Taylor, who I am communicating with. And I just want to go back to it. I guess it was around December of 1973, around Christmas 1973. This Army Intelligence CIA guy named George Koopman, who was funding us, he was one of the guys funding us at the Physics Consciousness Research Group. You read about that in MIT professor David Kaiser's best-selling book from 2011, How the Hippies Saved Physics. And George is there with me, and I think Saul Paul Sirag and Fred Allen Wolf. And he's saying, George says, Jack, the CIA was basically formed in 1947 because of two things. And what the CIA really wants to know from you guys to figure out I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but this is what he says. Number one, how does consciousness work? He means the physics of consciousness. And that's David Kaiser talks about the Physics Consciousness Research Group, which was set up with money from not only George Koopman, but Werner Erhard and Lawrence Rockefeller through Jean Lanier, and the whole story there, big story. Brian Josephson came to visit us, and we were working with Puthoff and Tog at Stanford Research Institute, all that stuff. It's all in the book, How They Say Physics, and how this led to quantum entanglement realization that that's important, and Bell's theorem and the Nobel Prizes of 2022, and how we triggered all that. And so George says, the CIA wants to know how consciousness works, purely physical phenomena like what now what Penrose and Hameroff are trying to talk about, but also how do the flying saucers work? So those are two questions. How does consciousness work, and how does all this spooky paranormal stuff work, like what Uri Geller was doing, and how do flying saucers fly? And that's basically what I've been doing for the last 50 years. And basically, I claim I solved the first problem, the paranormal high strangeness, this slide 9 problem. Basically, I got the basic realization for that back in 1994, when the book by David Bohm and Basil Hiley, Undivided Universe, came out. And I won't go into all the details, but there was a passage in that book which triggered what I believe to be the solution to this problem, and explains all the high strangeness stuff that UFO abductees and contactees report. We understand it in terms of basic what's at the bottom of the slide? What was considered phenomena is now quantum physics. I think it's Louis Elizondo. Basically true, but one important addition, it's not quantum physics, it's what we now call post-quantum physics, which is a more general version of the quantum theory, in the same way that Einstein's general relativity, which explained gravity, was a generalization of his special relativity, which gave us the atomic bomb, right? E equals mc squared and all that stuff. In the same way that general relativity explains gravity, which special relativity could not explain, post-quantum mechanics explains consciousness, ordinary consciousness, and all the spooky telepathic stuff from the remote viewing and Uri Geller bending metal, all that kind of remote viewing, seeing the future, and all the Ingo Swann, psychic penetration, all that stuff is now part of post-quantum physics, and they're two sides of the same coin. Turns out the two problems are really the same problem. And this is like what Lenny Susskind, who Lenny and I briefly worked together at Cornell in 1963, 1964. What Lenny Susskind says, ER equals EPR. Let me translate that for you guys into UFOs and the paranormal. ER is UFO gravity warp drive. That's the Einstein-Rosen wormhole kind of stuff, quantum gravity, foam, all that stuff. That's the ER part. The EPR is the quantum entanglement signaling, all the spooky telepathic physics consciousness part. And they're equal in a way. They're dual. They're connected to it, like wave-particle duality in Niels Bohr's stuff. So they're intimately two sides of the same coin, so to speak, like or Janus, the two faces of Janus. In fact, Lenny Susskind even says that general relativity equals quantum mechanics. So the two, when George Koopman says in 1973, Christmas time, says, Jack, the CIA wants to know, how does consciousness work physically, and how do flying saucers fly? He's really talking about Lenny Susskind's ER equals EPR. And also at that time, when I was writing Space-Time Beyond, I actually had that idea, ER equals EPR, in a much more primitive form than what Lenny, 40 years or so later, actually came up with. And also I had the more advanced version. See, Lenny has, in ordinary quantum mechanics, you have non-traversable ER wormholes equals non-signaling quantum entanglement. which is the basis of our quantum cryptography, right? That because if you can't signal with EPR, you can get, they think you get this very safe, military and even banking, financial banking communications. However, that's kind of imaginal line. It's not really so, because the psychics can get over that. And in the post-quantum mechanics, you have traversable wormholes, which are basically like Stargate time machine, time travel stuff. And that also goes hand in hand with the EPR signaling, which is all not only a regular consciousness, but all the spooky paranormal stuff that Jacques Vallée and Eric Davis do talk about in that paper, something 6, well, whatever it's called, the High Strangeness paper. It's actually a good paper. And I should actually give Hal Puthoff a plug. And he has a pretty good paper recently, where he's not trying to do physics. He's just summarizing the kind of stuff I'm telling you. And he does a pretty good job at it. But his other paper, his so-called metric engineering papers are not correct. But I support Hal in other ways, but not in this particular way. So let's stop here. I've been rambling. All right, this is this summarizes what I just said in probably too many words in the last slide. The preceding slides are explained by post-quantum mechanics, PQM, which in a nutshell is EPR signaling equals Einstein-Rosen or ER traversable wormhole time travel machines. Time machines like the Tic Tacs, I claim, are actually time machines. They can go through time, backwards in time. PQM, post-quantum mechanics, is to QM, or orthodox quantum mechanics, as Einstein's general relativity. GR is to Einstein's special relativity, SR. Remember, general relativity explains gravity, explains the warp drive. Special relativity cannot explain gravity, but explains a lot of other things. Now, general relativity is special relativity with something called action reaction. That's an important thing, which not this time, but we have to go into a lot of detail what this action reaction organizing principle means. It's not the same thing as Newton's third law of action reaction, though Newton's third law of action reaction is kind of a special, very specialized version of this more general organizing principle. Post-quantum mechanics, which explains our consciousness and all the spooky paranormal high strangeness stuff, slide 9, what Louis Elizondo calls slide 9. That's ordinary quantum mechanics, again, with the same general action-reaction principle, applied in a slightly different way. So this is very key. I'll keep coming back to this, because this is the great unification everybody's been waiting for, I think. Okay, now a little more detail. General relativity is the action of the space-time continuum, the four-dimensional space-time continuum, which is a geometrodynamical field, and with the stress energy tensor of ordinary matter. By the ordinary matter includes electromagnetic fields, photons. When I say ordinary matter, I include them, not just electrons and protons, but also photons and W mesons and gluons, all that stuff. So it's in general relativity, it's a space-time action and the stress energy reaction. And similarly, quite analogous to that, in post-quantum mechanics, we have the quantum waves. They're actually mental waves or proto-mental waves. They're not quite conscious yet. And we have the reaction of the same kind of stress energy reaction in general relativity, also happens here in a certain way, and that generates our consciousness. Now, this is a lot of complex stuff. I'm going to justify it in other lectures. I also have talked about it quite a bit on Tim Ventura's channel. There's a bunch of videos where I go into more detail. If you're seriously interested, you can see it there. And also there's a Kimber Afato's Star Drive, I think it's Star Drive channel report, has more videos. So this is a key thing that's, we're gonna have to, you're gonna have to try to understand it.
This is a good break point now, because that was kind of like my general tying in with what Adnell was saying yesterday, and you'll see a lot of the stuff is in agreement with John Warner was saying about, the general situation. And this is like the qualitative intro. What's going to follow, I'm going to actually get into some of the mathematics, the advanced stuff, and that may be better to do later in the week. I'm not sure. Let's see how it develops. But why don't we just open up to questions now based on what I just said and what John Warner and Rodriguez and Creon, all these guys said yesterday. So this is a good time. Now let's get some feedback from anybody who's here. So anybody has questions, go ahead.
Well, I have a that all makes good sense to me, so I don't really have a question. But one thing I'll say is lately with the balloon flap, and all this stuff, they're always chasing these things with fighter jets and missiles. And if you're going to go after a genuine UFO from another world, another star system, a fighter jet is basically 1930s technology, and missiles go back to the 19th century. So, it's nonsense. The F-35 may have optical invisibility, it may have weight reduction technology on it, but they're basically, fighter jets, it's ridiculous. They're always running out of fuel. The minute you take off from a carrier or anything else, their bingo fuel is only like 40 minutes away, especially if you hammer the afterburners. And the F-35 has major speed potential. So it's just nonsense that they're chasing these UFOs. Everyone said the X-15 of the early 60s, it flew up into space. It was like, I don't know, Mach 5 or better. And it was like, oh, a UFO chaser. And I'm like, that thing couldn't turn. It takes like 50 miles to make a right turn, 90 degrees.
Exactly.
And so it's not going to chase a UFO that does a right-hand turn. However, I do have a question for everyone, especially Jack. What are your thinking on that UFOs and spacecraft need an electromagnetic space-time bubble in order for the occupants who are in a slightly different reality or dimension inside, and you can do right turns at Mach 100 and survive the rigors of gamma radiation and micromedia.
John, that's exactly what we've explained. You see, this is so hard. This is the big barrier, because I just read, for example, there's this guy, Joseph Foster. He's a smart guy. Army, he's an Army, he's involved in project management, Army engineering stuff. And I'm sure he knows his engineering. And he sort of asked me the same question you're asking. You guys just don't get it. It's very hard. It's mind that gets it. They don't get it. They don't get it.
It's a big obstacle, Jack, for a lot of people.
Yeah. So,
Unbelievable.
But I try to explain it, but it's very hard to you guys to get. It's not an electromagnetic bubble. Okay, wait, just let me talk. It's not an electromagnetic bubble, John. It's this this is what Alcubierre's thing is all about. When they talk about the warp drive bubble, okay, well, wait a minute. The electromagnetic field is converted into the gravitational field. So, okay. Let me say it this way. If you look at Einstein's gravity field equation, the basic mathematics of general relativity, okay, what that really is saying is that there's a gravitational field output and there's what's called the stress energy input, and then there's the coupling. There's something that couples, and it turns out the thing that couples them together, I'll call it the electrogravitic connection, something like that, because turns out it involves what's called Newton's gravitational constant, which is the basic parameter of gravity, but it also involves the speed of light, which is an electromagnetic phenomenon, okay, according to Maxwell's equations. So, so what you can say is, all right, if you look at Alcubierre's paper, there's the key model for warp drive. There's this thing called the warp bubble, and the warp bubble itself, it's just a curvature. It's just a purely gravitational structure. It's like a curvature field in the space-time structure itself, in the curved space-time. But in order to create it, you need an electromagnetic field to create it. So it's both, let's call it electromagnetic gravity bubble, if you like. All right, so
Yeah.
that's okay. But we
But
understand
remember-
it. Well, we
Remember,
understand.
they have to, if you got a sixth dimensional star being,
No, forget that. No sixth dimension.
They-
Stop.
gotta
No
talk
sixth
about
dimension.
dimensions.
No.
Forget
That's
about the
your-
language,
You may have,
Ron,
you may have,
forget it.
you may have 6th-degree dementia like Joe Biden, but it's no, all that stuff with higher dimensions, we don't need it. We don't need it. Remember Einstein said.
He
keep
died
it-
50 years ago.
Wait, no, actually more than 50 years ago. I think it's more than 50 years.
Yeah.
It's, it's
It's almost 70 years ago.
It's almost 70 years ago.
1955.
Yeah, right. Okay, but let me stay on this train of thought now. And I think I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, ask the question.
Warfield.
Ask the question.
Warfield, geodesics.
Is what?
Geodesics.
No, well, that's okay. Well, John, repeat your question. You started talking about 6th-dimensional bullshit, and that got me,
Okay.
diverted.
I'm a firm believer that the universe and cosmos has 12 dimensions, and in between those dimensions are infinite layers. Now,
All right. Okay.
It-
Well, I don't need
it-
that. I don't need that. I don't need any of that.
okay,
Oh,
but the
I
physics
remember. I
change
remember.
in every,
John,
the physics
John.
change in every layer.
Okay, no, wait,
Jack,
no,
you're
yeah.
talking
but
about a
that's-
work bubble.
I don't need, again, I want to get back to Einstein. Einstein says, keep it as simple as possible, but not simpler than is possible. Okay, now at Cornell, let me explain. At Cornell, when I was an undergraduate there with Hans Bethe, the guys who built the atomic bomb Manhattan Project, and the whole Cornell philosophy was, again, what Einstein said, but they said, try to keep the math simple as you can. Try to get more physics out of less math. The better the physics, less math. They had kind of engineering. Yeah, they had just built the atomic bomb. Like I was there. Okay, I was there in 56. It was only 12 years since they did it. So I was with the guys who actually built the bomb. They were my teachers. Okay, and so we want to keep it simple. I don't need 12 dimensions. I don't. You look a lot of these papers and theoretical physics on the archive. A lot of it is just mathematical bullshit. It's excess mathematical advantage. I mean, it's good mathematics, beautiful. It's like opium. Okay, I want to say all this advanced, a lot of the mathematical stuff. It's like smoking dope or smoking opium. It's very pleasant, all these dreams, but you don't really need it to solve this problem. It's kind of engineering physicists, we want to use the minimal amount of apparatus to achieve the result. Okay, so forget everything about 6 dimensions, 12. That string theory is a lot of bullshit. We don't need it. It's a lot simpler than that, and it's just noise in the signal. Keeping it's like you're full of opium dreams. Smoke. Get rid of smoke, and let's stay focused on what we really need to know. We want a minimal toolkit. We don't want to have all this other stuff that we don't need.
Well,
All right.
I mean, I'm a student of metaphysics, so this is the nature of our reality, and so you have to go beyond the mathematical and physics nuts and bolts, because these craft.
Actually, I don't
dimensions.
have to. No, I don't have to do that because I have a practical problem. Look, we got these things flying around, man. They
Yeah, but they're in higher dimensions.
No,
They have
they're
to
not.
maintain
No, they're
that
not.
dimension inside the
okay,
craft.
But no, that's not true. That's just, you have a picture that we don't need all that stuff. We don't need it. It's a lot simpler than that.
Excess bad news.
Jack, if I could interject for a moment. So Michael Moran has his hand up, and then John does after him as well.
Okay. Go ahead.
Dr. Sarfatti, when you're talking about some of the physics in the past, how would you factor in chime events and look?
What did you say, China? What did you say? China?
No, I'm sorry. How would you factor in chime events and look and collect the data into the torsion fields from chime, which is chimes is, I believe you understand, is communicating hazard information into the environment of physics.
No, I don't understand what you're saying. Do you understand what he said?
He
I
says
believe
chime, like
chime.
bell.
Time.
Time, Time.
No, sir, CHIME. Time. Events.
I never heard that word.
Is that like FRBs or something?
I don't know what you said. I don't know. I never heard the word. I don't know what it means.
Michael, do you think
chime?
you could you elaborate?
It's an acronym.
Yes, I'm sorry, somebody say something?
It's an acronym.
Right, yeah, so CHIME stands for communicating hazard information in the environment.
Okay, listen, for one thing, don't use acronyms with me because I don't know what you're talking about. Say it what it is. Say the whole word. I don't know. I say, okay, that's because Mike is military. In the military, all they use is acronyms.
They
It's,
use
to
all
me,
this
it's
techno
pig
back.
lads. It's a foreign language. I don't understand it. So now what is it now? Hazardous information? I don't know.
So communicating hazard, so upon a UAP and observing the communication hazard information of the environment, you can look and collect the data on in the torsion fields, which you were talking about yesterday.
Okay, now wait a minute. Okay. It mostly sounds like bullshit to me. Let me just be very honest. Sounds like bullshit. Now, the whole idea of torsion fields, that's a tricky thing. Torsion is an extension of general relativity. You do not need it in the ordinary physics in vacuum. I am open to the idea that the torsion phenomenon will apply inside the metamaterials. This is David. Is David Chester here? Because Chester is Chester here? No.
Hi.
All the stuff Chester talks about may actually become important inside the metamaterial. That, in other words, the gravitational field inside the metamaterial fuselage of these craft may involve torsion fields and even other kind of what I call non-metricity fields. Just a minute, I have this I have to turn off this mail program, which is making these noises. Okay. All right, so does that answer your question? I don't know what. What happened to him? Where's Michael? Is he still there?
Right. I mean, there's a lot of claims that are made about torsion, but it's hard to know what to make of them. I mean, who has detected torsion on Earth? Who has experimentally detected torsion? Like when you hear claims of people saying, oh, there were torsion fields that did something, like who's actually measured those torsion fields? Like it's not clear.
Is he saying there's
is that Chester? Is that Dave? Is that you?
Yeah. That was Dave.
Yeah.
Oh, you're there. Okay, that is you. Okay.
I think Michael might have lost his connection.
Yeah.
I'm right here.
Oh,
He
okay.
was just muted.
Sorry about that.
Okay. So the idea of torsion fields, the extensions of general relativity that David Chester talks about, I think, it's just an intuition. I could be wrong, but my intuition is that all that stuff he's talking about is actually going to be important inside. Okay, here's the main thing, the main problem. General relativity, actually it's both special and general relativity, formulated by Einstein, really only works in the vacuum. When you look at all of Einstein's thought experiments, all the stuff in his mind, he was talking about light rays going through vacuum. And remember, this is 1905. There's not even hardly any quantum mechanics. In 1915, there's still not any real quantum mechanics. And there's not much known about material science, about, there's no quantum theory of solids and condensed matter physics. So it turns out that general relativity has only been tested really out in space, with the bending of light by the sun.
Eddington.
And the gravitational redshift, that's all okay in atmosphere, so it's almost like vacuum. It's and then the other thing that it turns out in general relativity, and special relativity, it only works because the vacuum does not have any dispersion. Dispersion means that the speed of light will depend upon the frequency of the light ray. Now, fortunately for us, that doesn't happen in vacuum. It happens maybe at very high energies, but for ordinary light, for infrared, microwave, all the stuff we use, the speed of light in vacuum is basically the same, provided you're in an inertial frame. That's another point. Oh, by the way, David, I was going through some of your slides. I realized there are a few conceptual, I wouldn't call them errors, but distinctions that have to be made by going through your slides. I fixed up, you'll see in my new version of some of your slides, it's little tweaks. I'm tweaking it because, but we'll save that for when we get more into the mathematics, not in this particular session, perhaps.
And Jack, do you think that we could go to Jean Ramirez also?
Yes. Okay. Go to Jean.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, Jack, by the way, enjoyed your presentation. I didn't know what first intelligence analyst meant. I think that's a typo. It just should say intelligence analyst instead of like.
Yeah, I'll fix all
ST.
that.
Yeah, thanks. My question is sort of related to what John Warner talked about, not necessarily applied to propulsion systems, but is there a physics that describes consciousness?
Well, yes, that's what I'm telling you. Yes.
Yes, there is, right?
Well, no, that's mine.
Yeah.
I've done it.
You've
Okay.
done it, right? Okay,
Yeah.
and so
And there's a paper. Wait, before, let me just, I'll give you the reference. There's this guy, Paavo Pilkin, in Finland and Sweden. He's a professor, he's a cognitive scientist, okay? He has written a review paper back in December of 2022. He's a major guy. He's funded by the Fetzer Foundation, big professor. He has credibility in his field. He's a mensch, he's not a crazy guy like Jack Sarfatti. Any case, in his review paper, he has a whole section. It's called Section 7. We have Louis Elizondo slide 9. There's Paavo's Section 7, which is a nice qualitative explanation of my theory. He's explained it to his peers, to his people in cognitive science, psychology. He's done a very nice job. Anybody can understand it. And I've given the reference many times. Just write to me, and you get the link. And
I just sent it, Jack, to everybody.
John. Okay. Okay. Whatever. And he explains. Yes. Okay. When the CIA back then said, we want to know how consciousness works and how the flying saucers fly. I claim, of course, I could be wrong. It has to be debated, peer review, all that. But I claim to have basically solved that problem already back in the 1990s. That problem's been solved. Now, when a theoretical physicist says he solved a problem, that means we conceptually understand it. There's this guy, David Deutsch. This is important, actually, because a lot of people, this is what this guy, Mark Sokol, doesn't understand. That David Deutsch has, if you read his books, I forgot the name of the book, The Mathematical Universe. I'm not sure. David Deutsch, he invented quantum computing, programming. He's at Oxford University. He's a real smart guy. And David Deutsch says the whole function of theoretical physics and of science in general is to create narratives, stories. We around the camp, we're like cavemen around the campfire, stories. And all that theoretical physics is, it's a kind of narrative. It explains things. But when I say I've solved the problem, I'm a theoretical physicist. What I mean by that is we understand what there is in the basic laws of physics that can explain the phenomenon. It doesn't mean that I could go off into a laboratory and tell somebody how to build a conscious computer. Okay. But I think that, let me put it again like this. When Einstein, 1905, he has equals mc squared, right? Equals mc squared. So at that point, and they didn't know much nuclear physics, but when Einstein explains how the equivalence of energy to mass, that is a basic ingredient, necessary feature of nuclear physics and the atomic bomb, it doesn't mean Einstein could just, in 2 minutes, create a nuclear reactor or even create a bomb, right? That required the Manhattan Project. So the same way, when I say I understand consciousness, that doesn't mean I can build a conscious computer, although I think we can make, well, in fact, I think the flying saucers, they are conscious computers. They are. And it's interesting that this guy Miles, Miles Albert, and he's a entrepreneur and a venture capitalist investor in Silicon Valley. He's just contacted me, and he just sent, about 3 days ago, and he just sent me this whole thing. He has a company that's making what do they call them? Organized brain tubes. They're taking brain cells. Whatever it is, it's a component of what we're talking about. They are interfacing metamaterials, inorganic, structures with these living brain cells, and
I just sent it.
they're making
Organoids.
organoids,
Yes.
and they have a whole
I
thing
just
already
sent it.
happening, which is part of what I've been talking about. I mean, he wants me to help them do this. Okay, so it's all happening. It's all happening. This is the technology that these flying saucers are using. But you got to understand, they're from the future. Okay, these guys. Well, I think these Tic Tacs are from the future. They're the same intelligence that contacted me back in 1953. Basically say that I and the others, like, Put Off and Target and all these guys, all the crazy guys that, that we're creating them. We are their creators. We are their creators. They're back here. It's like a loop in time. It's like that. It's like Star Trek IV. Did you see, so where they go back to San Francisco, from the future to create? Yeah. Okay. Well, curiously enough, Paramount Pictures paid me to explain time travel in what they call the director's cut of Star Trek IV. There's a guy in there, the rocket scientist who creates the warp drive. That's me. That's Jack Sarfatti. So it's like well, here's the thing. Who's the guy who created Star Trek?
Gene Roddenberry.
Gene Roddenberry.
Yeah, Gene. Okay, Gene. Okay. Now, see, it's all a type. Gene Roddenberry was working with Andrea Puharich. And Andrea Puharich, yeah, I was involved with Andrea Puharich. Andrea Puharich he's connected with the CIA. Andrea Puharich is the guy who brought Uri Geller to Stanford Research Institute. All right, but Andrea Puharich had this group of channelers.
The Council of Nine.
The Council of Nine, all that stuff. Gene Roddenberry was part of that. Gene Roddenberry was part of that. So it's all connected. That Star Trek is, well, what John Warner is basically saying, we're living in a Star Trek universe for real, right? I mean, that's it. That's what's going on. I mean, all these science fiction stories are actually there's kind of anticipations of reality. There is a book called Hollywood and the UFOs that came out, Hollywood and the UFOs, in which the writer of that book came out about 25 years ago. The writer of that book says that the CIA was involved with Francis Ford Coppola and Spielberg. All these science fiction movies are basically softening up. They're part of the whole disclosure thing, right? Okay. Now, I mean, I used to hang out with Francis Ford Coppola back in, part of the whole thing, that hippie say physics. And it's because of my connection with Francis Ford Coppola that Jacques Vallée met Spielberg to do Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Okay. Also, I was the model for Emmett Brown in Back from the Future. I mean, so this is all a very tight thing. And we have, I mean, it's all happening in San Francisco, Hollywood. I mean, it's all connected. There's a tight web of synchronicity here, not just synchronicity, of causal connections. So, and why is Spielberg, what is Spielberg doing now? I mean, he actually should be talking to me. Spielberg's new movie is all going to be about how the future creates the past. Okay. So it's all, do you see what I'm trying to say? Am I making sense now to you guys? I mean, it ties in with what John Warner was saying yesterday. Okay, let me end it. Let's end this because it's getting late. Let me just say this. The gravitational control technology changes everything as far as the military is concerned. right? I mean, you may only need 10 guys to win a war. Yeah, with that technology, UAPs, you control. Remember, you're also controlling time. You have time travel.
Yeah, but
You
war
gotta
is
check-
money.
What?
War is money. It keeps the world going around, money.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
why
and
they-
then let's remember what Creon Levitt said, that the reason that your cousin and Elizondo that they don't like what I'm saying is because they haven't been able to solve the damn problem with all the trillions of dollars in their black budgets. And here we've basically I'm saying I've basically solved the problem, and now
Well, I
it's
think
out.
they're upset because you're upsetting the apple cart and you're spilling the beans. I
Yeah,
think they've solved some of the problems in the military industrial complex, but they don't want you talking about it and
Well,
how
maybe
it
so, but then
works.
they could have read me in on that, and I wouldn't. See what I'm saying? So I don't think they have, because everybody, I mean, like you're like Chris, he didn't know anything about physics.
Oh, he's just a mouthpiece. He's not the scientist working on this stuff. Those
Yeah,
black
well,
triangles flying
yeah, but
around.
I
are
hope,
Lockheed Martin.
okay, but Hal Puthoff is a scientist. Okay, I know Hal very well. Hal doesn't understand it either.
So what?
And neither is Eric Davis. So they're the public scientists,
Well,
right?
Jack, if I could interject for a moment. So I've done over the last year, I've done over probably 100 interviews, and it's taken me so many hours of research and interviews and hearing from people to really value a lot of the things that you're saying. It's not about understanding, it's about understanding why it makes sense. And I one of the things that I feel about your work is, because you have done so much work for so many years, I think that even people who kind of get it don't fully grasp it because they just haven't spent the time on it yet.
Well, yeah, but there's also well, that's true, but there's also a resistance. They don't want to know what I'm talking about, and
Yeah.
and why is that? And okay, well, maybe
Yeah.
for the reasons that John Warner just said. I don't know.
Well,
Well,
and
the
the
other-
only reason I mention that is, like, for instance, the ER equals EPR, right? For me, the significance of that, even a year ago, it just would gone right past me, right? But now, having done this other work, I don't fully understand it, but it's like, okay, yes, this is super important. I understand now why Jack is talking about this.
Right. The other thing we have to consider, sadly, and I say this with great trepidation, the average IQ of the world is 90,
Yeah.
maybe 80.
Yeah.
And all they care about is, the beer and the wine and the cheese and the chips and
And the
watching all
superconscious.
Yeah, but we don't care about them. The problem is that the average IQ of our leaders is like 70.
Well, that's another problem is, the Mellons and Elizondos of the world, they're just doing a job. They're patriots, in their own minds.
Yeah.
Even though they're fucking around with humanity's consciousness, they're lying, they're still like, oh, I'm doing the right thing. I put them in 100 IQ bag. I'm sorry. I'm not.
Sure. I think that's being optimistic, but maybe maybe you're right. I mean, that's the problem. All right. Well, in any case, what do we get? Oh, hey, Nick just came in, but Nick, we're already finishing up, I think. Well, what's gonna go? Is anything scheduled for 8 o'clock or what? I see Nick.
No,
Cook.
I think that was everything that we had today, unless you want to continue open discussion.
Nick, did you want to say how long did you just arrive, Nick?
He just arrived a moment ago.
I did. So greetings all. Jack, wonderful to see you. Many
Where
other
are
friends I see in the gallery. Hi all. Yeah, I'm so sorry. You will know I have a few domestic issues. We've got
yes. Are you in London?
walking wounded in the family, so I have
Yes.
to attend to them. But it is truly wonderful to see everyone. And I've heard great things about it. I'm looking forward to catching up on the replay. Good job, Tim.
Okay, did you see the first video from yesterday?
I've not yet, but I'm going to catch up on it today.
Okay, so I'll be back in London in a week. So let's get together, because I'm there for another almost 2 weeks before I go back.
For sure. Yeah, that'll be great. Look forward to it.
All right. Okay. All right. So what do you want to continue or what?
I was curious what Michael Moran was talking about with the so I think if I'm understanding correctly, UAP observations on Navy vessels or something, he's saying that's an opportunity to look for signatures that may help us figure out which theoretical models should be investigated.
Okay, good. That's good. Let me respond to that. That's a precise question I can respond to. If I've already made predictions, it's a very obvious signature. And those
So then the question is, what
I haven't said it yet. I haven't
Sorry.
let me say it. I haven't said it, what it is. You interrupted me before I could even,
Go ahead.
The obvious, it's the reverse Doppler effect. That's in gravity warp drive. If a tic tac's coming toward you, you should see a red shift rather than a blue shift, or at least okay. And here's the thing: if the tic tac's coming toward you, it's not actually moving relative to the air, so it's not clear whether you see any Doppler shift at all. So if it's coming toward you, it should look red. If it's going away from you, it should look blue. Just the reverse of the Doppler. That's the Alcubierre warp drive picture. Okay, and so the point is this. What I'm saying is they must have in these F-18s and all these, they must have spectral analysis of their remote sensing signals. And from the spec, in other words, all they have to do, it's so simple. All they have to do is take the data from the spectral shifts of their signals, compare it with an ordinary object, and then compare it with the tic tac, and they're going to see an anomalous. They're going to see something anomalous in that frequency data. So that's the first thing to look at. And maybe they have done that. I would think that if they did it, it's classified. They probably have done it because, I've been talking. Okay, Frank Milburn has written 2 BESA papers. BESA is the Begin Sadat Institute at Bar Ilan University. It's the Mossad, right? The Mossad, bunch of smart Jewish guys, right? That's their thing. And Frank, who's a former Special Forces British, SAS, Red Beret, and all that stuff. Frank has mentioned all the stuff that I'm saying, so it's out there. The Russians monitor my stuff. So the point is, that's a very specific prediction of the warp drive theory, that you will get these anomalies in the spectral data from the Doppler shifts. The Doppler shifts are going to look kind of screwy. They look the opposite. The ship is coming toward you, and you're seeing a red shift rather than a blue shift. Okay, as soon as you see that, bang, that's it. That's warp drive. There it is. Very simple. So why haven't they done it? Or maybe they have done it, it's classified, and they don't want. And if they don't want Jack Sarfatti to talk to the Russians, okay, I'm going to be giving a talk like this to Moscow by Zoom in 2 months. Now, has Pandolf or anybody else called me and said, Jack, we don't want you talking to the Russians? No, they haven't done that. Why haven't they done that? So they want me to talk to the Russians, or is it just that they're stupid and they don't know? It's like 9/11, right? There was all this that they failed in 9/11. Are they going to fail now in this? They want me to give this stuff to Putin? Should I do it or not do it? Nobody said don't do it, Jack.
It's not the Russians.
So what's wrong with this picture? Do you see what I'm saying? What's wrong with this picture?
Jack, when you mentioned redshifting and the reverse Doppler effect, do you think that some of that might explain what was captured on the FLIR cameras, right? And that's
I don't know, because
spectrum.
I don't know. I don't know anything about they haven't received. I haven't seen any. There's nothing about spectral analysis and anything that's public. I don't know.
The only reason I ask is those are publicly available videos, right? And so
but you can't tell looking just at a black and white video what the spectral signals are. You need
you're not going to get that from there for sure. Well, what other effects though might we see? Like if we expect if torsion can be involved in these processes, we might
forget torsion. There's the torsion. If there's torsion that's inside the, okay, it's a good question. The torsion field effect, if it's there, it's only in the interior of the metamaterial fuselage. It's not in the vacuum, unless there might be torsion. But okay, there are different theories of torsion. There are actually now because we studied this quite a bit at ISSO. Joe Firmage's thing 20 years ago with Creon and Larry Lemke and stuff like that. some theories say that there are torsion waves like electromagnetic radiation, but other theories say there aren't torsion waves. But so I don't really know what the true answer is there, but I do think that for what I do know is some of the models I've made that these anomalous gravitational effects inside the metamaterial are finite range, like Yukawa. It's like the graviton has a mass, has a rest mass inside. It's the Meister, it's the Meister effects. Just like in a superconductor, the photons in a superconductor have a rest mass, and that's why you have exclusion of magnetic fields. And it's kind of like
might you have a near field outside the surface of the material?
Yeah, but yes, but it'll only maybe a few nanometers or microns or something like that. It's not going to go out where they could detect it.
Certain radio frequencies, like up near terahertz, could interact with that, maybe.
Well, I don't know. I mean, okay, these are questions that have to be studied. Okay, that's not a bad question. If there was a torsion field inside the metamaterial, could that somehow give a signal in the far field? We don't know. I don't know. But it's something to study. It's not
interesting.
Are there any other? Go ahead.
How would we detect non-metricity actually, or was someone else?
Well, what happened to David Chad? This is David.
Yeah, David would.
We could talk about it on Thursday.
Let's not talk about it now. Let's because everybody's tired.
We might as well. We have time.
Yeah.
Well, they're trying. I mean, it's going to be difficult. I mean, no one's conclusively measured torsion, and non-metricity is even more subtle. So I'll just at least talk about how subtle non-metricity is so we can get an idea, but I don't have any concrete ideas of how to connect it to experiment yet.
Let's not spend time on that.
A lot of theory is needed.
Yeah, and it's a pretty advanced mathematical topic for the non-physicists here. But okay, so I think that's it. Unless anybody has a general question. I'm going to do more than my next talk is going to be all mathematics. Basically, it's going to be the real stuff. Okay. Yeah.
Jack, this is Puchonas speaking. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Who is this?
Puchonas. Walt Williams. Setby. I'm the guy who started Setby.
Yeah. Patron. Hey, Extronius? You mean Extronius?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Extronus. Yeah. I go by various names. I went into hiding for a reason.
Okay.
The question I have is, I talked to Massimo Teodorani last night. He's a guy's doing instrumentation with Erling Strand in Hestdale, Norway. I've been talking to them for years.
Yeah.
And they're talking about their instrumentation that they're developing right now is addressing the very issues that you're bringing up at the moment. I tried to get him to sit in on your lectures, but he's busy doing lectures in Europe.
Is he in Norway?
Yes, he's in Norway. Right now he's in Italy, but
in Italy where?
I'm sorry?
Where in Italy is he?
I have no clue. His name is Massimo Teodorani.
Oh, Teodorani. Oh.
Yeah. And
do you know him?
We chat back and forth since like around 1992, 93 about various things. I'm an instrumentation engineer.
Yeah, I know what you are. Yeah.
And so my interest is I want to talk to him. And that's the theme that I've been working on for years. Whereas everybody else wants to do instrumentation on how the things work. And we don't really merge a lot. But your points about the Doppler shift, I saw that in a flying saucer over White Sands Missile Range. And it's exactly what you described. It was moving away from me, but it was red shifting. And
no, wait, it moves away from you. No.
I'm sorry, it was moving away from me. It was blue shifting.
Yeah.
Okay.
I saw an increase in the wavelength got shorter.
Okay,
so
that's it. That's warp drive. Now, can
when was that?
you write this up? Have you written it or what?
Well, Bruce Cornett wrote it up at one point, and because he was a member of my SIPI group back in the the mid
Oh, yeah, I
'90s.
know Bruce talk. I know Bruce is but was this with sound waves or with electromagnetic waves?
No, this was visible. I saw it visibly.
Oh, this is optical. This is visual.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it also, something else happened just before it disappeared. The whole sky around it, about the craft was about this big around at
Yeah.
arm's length, and the sky around it, about this big around, looked like it turned to blue paper mache.
Yeah, well,
And
that's gravity. That's the warp field. That's gravity.
and I
Stop.
did talk to Kip Thorne about this back in 1998
And what did he
about
say?
I'm sorry.
What did he say? Go ahead. I'm listening.
Well, he said, I asked him if it could be a wormhole, and his
Yeah.
response was that he thought it would be unstable due to the tidal effects. But
Yeah.
he didn't poo-poo it. He didn't he didn't say, oh no, it wouldn't be.
Yeah.
But it was an interesting conversation we had. I'm
Yeah,
not a
I bet-
physicist.
Yeah, but let me, yeah, that's funny. Yeah, Kip Thorne is, if anybody would know the truth about that, if anybody's like my peer in this, it's Kip Thorne. By the way, I helped Kip Thorne move into his house when he first moved from Princeton to Caltech. I was with Richard Feynman and Feynman's Bug, and we went up to, he had just moved there. We went up there, and we all got stoned, by the way.
That's cool.
Back in 1967.
See, and military contractors can't talk about stuff like that, but
Well, this is 1967. But
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
And if I could, yeah, Larry has his hand up.
okay. Oh, Larry's here. Okay. Yes. Go ahead. Larry.
So, when was that sighting at White Sands?
1965.
Oh, 1965 this happened.
Yes.
Wow.
My mom worked at White Sands Missile Range, and we were on our way to an open house, and we were late going out the door. There was a bunch of things that happened 6 months afterwards. My mother started talking to aliens via something called central control. She ended up in a mental hospital being having electroshock therapy to bring her back to reality.
So to
But there
speak.
was, yeah, it was bad times for the family because nobody knew what the hell was going on.
Were
But
you in the
she-
military? Were you in the
No,
military?
no, I was a kid.
He was
I'm an
a
amateur
kid.
scientist type.
Okay. Okay. But you were living in New Mexico near White Sands.
I lived in El Paso, United States of Mexico.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, when the object disappeared, is it your perception that it was basically traveling directly away from you?
When I first saw it, it was off towards El Paso and it was about this big and something was shimmering. And I looked over and my mother was a pilot and I said, hey mom, what the hell is that? And she looked back. We were stopped off the side of the road and she squinted at it and said, oh, it's a helicopter. And I went back to watching it. And what it had done is it was vacillating. It
Yeah.
was doing a wobble. I was processing. And then it went from about this angle to horizontal with relationship to the horizon. And then it slid toward us and came almost directly to a stop over the top of us. And then it dropped straight down, not quite directly over us, although it did cast a shadow around us on the ground.
So it was a close
What was
encounter.
the shape? What was the shape?
It was a close encounter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It was a close encounter.
What
From
did
a
it look
distance
like?
of, it looked exactly like the Bob Lazar sport model minus the windows.
Okay.
And it was shiny. The bottom of it looked like a mirror. I mean, it was beautiful. The machine was absolutely beautiful. But one of the things that caught my attention was that one was absolutely silent. And two, I didn't feel any heat from it. And yet I just watched it transit like 35 degrees of sky. I mean, do you ever be
That's
around an
warped.
SR-71 when it comes in?
Yeah.
Man, you have to wear a heat shield. They're like, 3
Yeah,
blocks
this
away
is
from
all.
the
This
thing.
is all evident. This is all warp drive. This is all
Well,
gravity.
Yeah.
actually, this is kind of related to what I'm going to talk about tomorrow about the Roswell, the memory foil.
Yeah.
And the other thing is when it went back up, it went up in 3 steps. It was horizontal, but it actually traveled straight up.
Yeah.
And each time it would stop, disappear and stop at a higher altitude. When it got up high enough, then it went back to this wobble thing it did.
Yeah.
tipped up at an angle. The sky around it went flat black, flat blue. And then right in the center where the craft had been, a black hole. It looked just like space, like I was looking into space. You ever take a low power laser and look at it directly?
Yeah.
And you
Right.
see how the granularity of how it gets that.
See,
Can you write all this stuff down in as much detail? Have you written it down so we can? have it on-
Somewhere I've got it written down, you know.
Okay, well, do it again. Can you do it now?
Yeah, sure, I'll do that. Yeah, and I'll,
Well,
I
so-
think
so-
the reason why I could see the polarization of the sky is because I wear glasses.
Yeah.
So there's, you know, the polarization difference between my,
So that could explain the color change, right?
no, the glasses wouldn't describe, you mean the
Well-
change of the sky
Yeah.
or the shifting?
Oh, actually, no, you said that's right. You said it was a sky.
Yeah, that's because the polarization difference between my spectacles and the natural polarization of the sky.
Yeah.
I
Well,
think there's
I'm really intrigued by you said that you basically, just before it disappeared, I guess, there was kind of a black dot, I guess, in the middle.
it was
of
where the
field.
craft had been.
Yeah,
Directly around where the craft had been, it went jet black. And then I could see pinpoints of light in there. And the light was red shifting, blue shifting.
see, I think that's gravitational lensing, that black
Yeah,
dot.
it's the multiple images. Yeah.
Because I've seen similar things, similar effects in orbs, basically.
Yeah, that's what I do. I'm a Loomis orb investigator.
So, and I had a very good, I had like a 45-minute observation one time, and it was nighttime, and basically you'd look at this orb, and under magnification, it was small enough that you couldn't really see it with the naked eye, but under magnification, you could see that there was a totally black dot
Huh.
right in the middle of this.
How close were you to it?
Huh?
How close was it to you?
Oh, at that point, maybe a mile and a half away.
Oh, no. The blue
Well,
orb that I
well,
saw over
well,
my driveway was 1 foot in front of my face.
Well, yeah. There you
I
go.
mean, it was like right here.
Right. My point is, if you think about it, you have the apparition is like a circle, okay, circular pattern, and the dot now is in the middle of that, right? Well,
Right.
if that dot were actually fixed on the object or whatever, it would have to be pointing directly at you in order for both of those to be concentric, right? For the dot.
Right. But it's,
So-
it's
so-
raised.
And in general, it's not pointing at you. So to me, that says that black dot has to be a phenomenon that's actually, related to your line of sight.
Yeah, it's a
And so-
ray
so I-
trace.
so
You're
I-
talking
so I
about ray
believe that-
tracing.
I believe what you're seeing is gravitational lensing. You're actually seeing the dark sky behind the object.
If I could jump in, a fellow named Thor who did the UAP theory website,
Right.
he looked
right.
at the Aguadilla video in Puerto Rico, and that was a top-down video, and he thought that he identified gravitational lensing as well.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Whatever
Where-
happened to him?
Where is that?
He just got nervous and he kind of disappeared. But I mean, I have a copy of his website. But in his case, there were a bunch of different things. It looked like the UAP, number one, there was a little bit of what appeared to be shape shifting. And then
Yeah.
it looked like at one point the UAP split into two and then
That's the-
reassembled. And he identified that as gravitational lensing, right? Like
Yes.
where it didn't actually
Yeah.
split into two, it just refracted
Right,
around
no,
this
that's
bubble.
right. You
Refraction,
can get it. You can get the split imaging, right? You can
Yeah.
get mirroring, right? I think that actually was apparent in that Australian case. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's where the automobile was coming around the corner with the headlights on, and as it approached the object, the headlights,
Yeah.
spin
Yeah.
around, and one of the drivers actually, steered the other way and drove into a tree because they You know,
Yeah.
they thought, but in that case, as when the object lifted off, same deal. You had a superior and an inferior image, which I'm pretty sure was due to the gradient in the index of refraction locally.
I just
But-
want to make one comment about Thor before we go.
Okay.
Some of your comments that you mentioned brings up the idea of what I call hemispheric orientation. I believe that there's a hemispheric orientation taking place between those who are having the ET experience and those who are not. And some of the points that you pointed out seems to suggest that is a possibility.
You're talking about brain. You're talking about the brain now. You're
Yeah,
talking about the brain?
left, right hemispheric. This
Yeah.
could also be part of the reason why they abduct us, that they're manipulating our neurologic so that we can either see them or we can't see them, or for whatever
Yeah.
their agenda may be.
Well, isn't this what Kit Green was working on? Isn't Kit Green? He's the brain guy for UFO.
I haven't talked to him.
And-
I believe in
And it's-
Kit Green's case, it came back to Havana syndrome, if I remember right, though.
yeah, but I'm talking about over the years. I mean, Green was
Yeah.
CIA's main brain scientist.
Yeah, it looks to me just sort of anecdotally that effect where you're not only seeing something or hearing something, but it affects your psyche, let's say, you know,
Yeah.
where it actually changes, you know, kind of your worldview or something like that.
Yes.
Seems to be correlated with the close encounters. That's why I asked. I mean, it seems like in the case of you and your mom, it certainly was close enough to have had that kind of effect.
Well, his mother did have the effect.
Yeah,
with
well,
his
that's what I'm
mother,
saying.
and obviously it must have happened
but in
with
my case,
Extonians
you know,
as well.
in my case, when it never got closer than a mile or two away, you know, it was just an intellectual exercise, right? It wasn't, you know, it wasn't some kind of, you know.
Well, Larry,
life-changing-
you think that's what you think, but you
Well,
made it-
yeah, I mean, there is a little incident like that where the first UFO that I and my family had was like on a family trip when we were down in the Central Valley of California. And one night we were coming back, you know, we saw this thing. And the funny thing is, I remember it again as a nocturnal light that was, you know, maybe a mile or two away. And everybody else in the family remembers stopping the car and getting out and looking up, and it was hovering overhead. And for the life of me, I absolutely do not remember that. I mean, I would never say that happened, right? But
Are you psychic?
yeah.
And there you go.
Yeah. Huh?
It's a hemispheric. My studies
Yeah.
back in the 90s demonstrated, and Alan Tuff, who was a member of my CETV group, he was friends with Albert Harrison, who was one of the guys at NIDS.
I knew Al, yeah.
And I presented these ideas. What I did is I wrote a database in Paradox. I also write some software. And so I could keep track of all my investigations. And I began to see an invariant pattern that a lot of the people that were having these contacts or claiming to be having contacts were all had certain characteristics, like, you know, they were loved nature, they were artists, they were musicians, you know, there was behavioral differences, and the guys who weren't seeing it weren't having the condom, the Edward Condom kinds of guys,
Right,
and Seth Shostak's, they are the left hemis, you know, they're the guys that they draw with rulers, and the right hemis freehand, right? And it's a hemispheric orientation. And I came to find out that all the right hemis are psychics. And they're the ones that are aware of the alien contacts. You ever talk to a psychic, they all know about it.
So I don't know, maybe, I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Gary Nolan and Kit Green have been investigating the correlation with the development of the caudate putamen complex in the brain. And if you could ever get either one of them on to talk about it, that would be a very useful.
Yeah, I'd like to talk to them.
That'd be a useful conversation to have.
And Jack's idea about this being the quantum physics with relationship to the consciousness.
Yeah.
Man, it fits in so perfect. It's amazing, because how else are they going to do the navigation?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
How do you?
Are you talking
Yeah.
about when they slice open the brain and going into it over in Michigan?
I'm sorry, say again?
You're talking about Dr. Green with in the brain. Are you talking about his neurodiology into the brain of it?
Yeah, it's related to that. I think these findings sort of came out of that line of research.
Okay, I have a good understanding what you're saying. Okay.
Okay.
All right, that's enough for me. I'm sorry, guys, for bumping in.
No, that was very interesting.
That
I'm
was
glad you-
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think I'm going to sign off now, Jack.
That was interesting about Kit Green, actually, Larry.
Okay, so tomorrow, right? We're gonna get, you're talking
Right,
tomorrow?
I'll be on at the 10 a.m. West Coast slot
Okay,
and talk
good.
about Roswell memory foil. So I'll
Okay, yeah, so yeah,
Cool.
let's start off.
see you guys.
See you guys tomorrow, right? Okay.
Okay, we'll close things
All right,
down for
great,
today. Thank you,
Jackie.
everyone.
Okay.
Oh, wait, before you do it, so you're not gonna have that section with Thor? will
No,
not-
no, I will,
But,
I'll
but,
edit that
but
out.
this, what just happened now, you're gonna
Yeah.
have that. It's important.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, this is really important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, good. All right. Ciao.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.